Captain Thorn Vex squinted at the cracked display of his wrist console, wondering if it was the device or his life that was malfunctioning. 5 minutes to docking, the robotic voice announced, somehow managing to convey the disdain of a TSA agent tired of telling you to take off your shoes. 5 minutes, Thorn muttered. Plenty of time to regret all my life choices. Corporal Snipe, fiddling with a pack of smokes he had no intention of quitting, glanced up. Regretting the divorce again, Cap, or just signing up for this suicide mission? Why choose Snipe? Misery loves company. The drop ship shuddered like a drunk trying to walk a straight line, and Thorn braced himself. Remind me who built this thing. Some alien race that went extinct trying to figure out how to put seatbelts in, Snipe said, lighting up and taking a long drag, the smoke curling like a middle finger to the ship's no-smoking signs. The tiny cabin was filled with the smell of burnt tobacco and anxious soldiers, each one pretending to be somewhere else. Thorn could see their thoughts like thought bubbles in a comic strip, most involved tropical beaches and cold drinks. All right, listen up, Thorn said, trying to sound like he wasn't about to throw up. In 5 minutes we hit the orbital tower. Not literally, I hope. We secure it fast and quiet. No heroics, leave that to the idiots in movies. Got it, Cap, Snipe said, smirking. No heroics. That's why we brought you. Love you too, Snipe. And remember, if anyone asks, I died heroically saving your sorry ass. The laughter in the cabin was half-hearted, like the kind you force out at a bad joke told by your boss. Thorn checked his weapon for the 3rd time, reassuring himself with the cold solidity of the gun. He could almost hear his mother's voice. Thorn, if you're going to play soldier, at least don't die stupid. The ship jerked again and the intercom crackled to life with a voice like gravel in a blender. Docking in 2, brace for impact. Impact? Private Dreg said, eyes wide as dinner plates. Aren't we supposed to be docking? You know how these pilots are, Thorn said. They consider not killing us all a successful landing. The ship collided with the docking port like a drunk guy hugging a lamppost, and Thorn was pretty sure half the crew had left their stomachs in orbit. He unbuckled and stood up, more or less upright, and smoothed out the creases in his uniform. Showtime, he said, stepping into the airlock. Try not to embarrass me more than usual. The airlock opened with a hiss, the kind that suggested the universe might have a slow leak it hadn't bothered fixing. Thorn led his team into the orbital tower, where the lights flickered like they couldn't decide if they wanted to work today. Welcome to the future, Snipe murmured, eyeing the corridor. Where the lighting is shit and nobody can find the switch. I think it's deliberately atmospheric, Dreg offered, trying for optimism. Yeah, if you're a serial killer, Thorn replied, stepping over a pile of what he hoped was debris. Remember, we're here to fix things, not decorate. They moved through the labyrinthine structure, past corridors that seemed designed by someone who had a grudge against right angles. Thorn could hear the whispers echoing down the passageways, rumors that humans were the architects of their own misery. You think it's true? Snipe asked, his voice low. The plague thing, what, that humans caused the galactic plague? Thorn snorted. We barely managed to keep our own toilets from overflowing. Creating a plague seems too competent. I dunno, Dreg said. We're good at screwing things up. True, Thorn conceded. But it takes a special kind of screw-up to wipe out half the galaxy. They reached the control room, a term that suggested a sense of organization the place clearly lacked. Thorn began tapping on the console, hoping it was more user-friendly than it looked. So, what's the plan, Cap? Snipe leaned against a wall panel that creaked ominously. Plan? Thorn arched an eyebrow. I thought we'd just wing it. You know how aliens love human improvisation. So, we're basically here to confuse them to death, Dreg asked, poking at a loose wire. Pretty much, Thorn replied. Welcome to my command style. The console beeped loudly, making Thorn jump. Initiating defense protocols, it announced in a voice that suggested it had better things to do. That doesn't sound good, Snipe said, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. Thorn checked the sensors, his eyes narrowing at the display. Well, shit, looks like we've got company. Friendly? Dreg asked hopefully. Does a rabbit punch feel friendly? Thorn shot back, watching the blips on the screen multiply like rabbits on a honeymoon. Outside the viewport, the blackness of space was suddenly illuminated by a fleet of ships, sleek and deadly, like sharks on a feeding frenzy. The alien markings were unmistakable, AI-controlled, no doubt. Machines had a way of being worse bastards than the flesh and blood variety. What do they want? Dreg asked, his voice trembling. Our pretty faces probably, Thorn said, too busy calculating options or the lack thereof to be reassuring. So we offer them you, Cap, Snipe said with a grin. You're the prettiest. Hilarious, Thorn replied dryly. But if I'm going down, I'm taking this entire tower with me. Sounds like a plan, Snipe said, checking his ammo. A terrible plan, but it's better than nothing. They watched the alien ships maneuver into attack positions, and Thorn felt that familiar weight in his gut, the one that said they were in deep. He activated the tower's defenses, hoping they weren't just for show. All right, men, Thorn said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. Let's make them regret ever finding us. The first salvo hit the tower and the structure shuddered like an old man in a cold wind. Thorn staggered but kept his balance, more out of habit than skill. This is why I never wanted a desk job, he muttered, focusing on the console. Too damn boring. The defensive guns sprang to life, belching fire and fury into the void. Thorn watched the tracers carve through the darkness, feeling a grim satisfaction. They teach you to shoot like that in basic? Dreg asked, watching the display. Nah, Thorn said. I learned it from playing video games. Makes sense, Snipe chuckled, firing his rifle into the narrowing corridor. Let's just hope they are as dumb as the AI in those games. Thorn couldn't help but smile. I always did like a good challenge. The AI-controlled ships responded with cold precision, but the human spirit, stubborn and reckless, was something they could never calculate. In the universe's cosmic joke, it seemed humans were the punchline. Thorn braced himself as another impact rocked the tower. Hold on to something, boys, he said, gripping the console like a lifeline. We're in for a hell of a ride. And there they were, in the middle of a galactic shitstorm, laughing in the face of their impending doom. Because what else could they do? It was the kind of gallows humor that kept you sane when the universe seemed hell-bent on proving you weren't. Thorn had a feeling it wasn't going to be a good day. But then again, when was it ever? The universe had a funny way of deciding which days would be pure hell, and today was that day for Captain Thorn Vex. As another blast rocked the orbital tower, he clung to the console like it was his last friend in a bar fight gone wrong. Outside, the AI fleet prowled, sleek and menacing like the universe's worst hangover on a Sunday morning. Well, this is a shit show, Thorn muttered, tapping buttons he hoped would do something useful. A few meters away, Corporal Snipe puffed contentedly on a cigarette that seemed to defy the laws of cabin pressure. Shit show? Cap, you're being optimistic. This is a full-blown circus, and we're the clowns, Snipe quipped, blowing smoke rings as if challenging the very concept of air filtration. Thorn glanced back at his team, his eyes landing on Jacksakin, a technician with more brain cells than everyone else combined, and Lyra Agon, a strategist whose plans usually involved less dying. Jaxa, any bright ideas about keeping us breathing? He called out, half expecting the worst. Jaxa, elbow deep in a mass of wires that looked more like a bird's nest than technology, shrugged. Sure, Cap. If you can give me 10 more hands and a miracle. Miracles are above my pay grade, Thorn said dryly. Lyra, what about you? Lyra, who was fiddling with a holographic display, didn't look up. Working on it, but if you've got a rabbit in your hat, now'd be the time to pull it out. Sorry, fresh out of rabbits, Thorn replied, turning back to the viewport as another alien ship unleashed a volley of fire. Guess we'll just have to make do with good old-fashioned desperation. From the corner, Private Dreg stumbled over, his face sickly pale. Cap, those ships look like they're getting ready for something bad. Something bad. Thanks for that brilliant analysis, Dreg, Snipe said, rolling his eyes. I was worried they were here for a bloody tea party. Enough, Thorn barked, though he couldn't help but smirk. Focus up, people. We're not beaten yet. The tower's defenses, a haphazard collection of ancient weaponry and wishful thinking, crackled to life again, spitting lasers like an angry cat. Thorn wondered if it was enough to even scratch the paint on those shiny AI hulls. "Jaxa, any chance we can reroute more power to the guns?" Thorn asked, hoping for a miracle he knew wasn't coming. "If by reroute you mean pray to the tech gods, then sure," Jaxa replied, pulling a face that suggested the tech gods were notoriously stingy. "Praying. Got it," Thorn said, turning to watch the unfolding chaos. "Lyra, keep those strategic thoughts coming. We're gonna need every bit of genius you've got." Lyra's response was a grim chuckle. "You might want to lower your expectations, Cap." Outside, the AI ships swooped in formation, sleek and deadly as a pack of wolves circling a wounded deer. Thorn could almost feel their cold, mechanical logic calculating the quickest way to end their miserable existence. "Any chance these AI bastards just fly off into the sunset?" Snipe asked, his voice layered with sarcasm. "I'd say about the same as us winning the lottery," Thorn replied, eyes fixed on the screen. "If we live through this, remind me to buy a ticket." "Will do, Cap," Snipe said, taking another drag. In the heart of the tower, the air was heavy with the smell of sweat, smoke, and the general air of impending doom. Thorn squinted at the radar screen, wishing he was anywhere but here, maybe on a beach with a drink that had a little umbrella. "Here they come," Dreg yelped, pointing as the AI fighters made their approach. "Hold your ground," Thorn ordered, though his own heart was pounding like a drum solo gone wild. He fired up the defense mechanism, the tower's automated weapons spitting out rounds with a zeal that could almost be called enthusiasm. "Show them what we're made of," Thorn shouted, more to keep his own spirits up than anything else. The AI ships danced around the defensive fire, sleek and untouchable as smoke. The console beeped, a cheerful reminder that things could always get worse. "Hacking attempt detected," the machine said, like it was reporting the weather. "Great, just great," Thorn muttered, running his fingers through his hair. "Jaxa, can you stop them from turning our own defenses against us?" "Already on it," Jaxa replied, fingers flying over her workstation with the kind of speed that would make a pianist jealous. "But they're good, Cap." "Real good. We'll have to be better," Thorn replied, trying not to sound as hopeless as he felt. Suddenly, the tower shook violently, sending Thorn and his crew sprawling. Sparks flew from the ceiling and the lights flickered in a way that did nothing to inspire confidence. "That's not good," Dreg mumbled, clutching the nearest stable surface. "Really, Dreg, I thought it was bloody fantastic," Snipe snapped, picking himself up. "Focus, people," Thorn said, steadying himself. "Lyra, any bright ideas on getting us out of this mess?" Lyra pinched the bridge of her nose, her tactical mind racing. "We need to lure them in closer, make them think they've got us, then hit them where it hurts." "So play dead and then bite their ankle?" Thorn asked, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Pretty much," Lyra replied. "But it'll only work if Jaxa can give us control of the main gun." "Working on it," Jaxa called, spitting into a wire she was twisting. "Just need a bit more time." "Time's not exactly our friend," Thorn said, casting a wary glance at the encroaching ships. "But desperation is," Lyra interjected, checking the tactical screen. "Let's hope the AI don't know that." As the alien ships drew nearer, their formation tightening like a noose, Thorn felt the weight of command settle on him like a stone. He'd led his team through hell before, but this felt different, like the universe had decided to up the stakes just for fun. "All right, team," Thorn said, his voice steady. "We let them get close, then we give him hell." "Jaxa, ready that gun." "I'll have it ready," Jaxa promised, wires sparking in her hands like fireworks at a funeral. "Snipe, Dreg, keep an eye on those corridors. If any bots try to board, we give him a warm welcome." "You got it, Cap," Snipe replied, checking his weapon with a nonchalance Thorn envied. "Remember, no heroics," Thorn said, looking each of them in the eye. "We stick to the plan and maybe, just maybe, we live to tell this sorry tale." Or at least make it into a decent bar story, Snipe joked, his smile a shade too tight. Exactly, Thorn said, turning back to the console. Places everyone. The alien ships, sleek and ominous, hovered just out of reach, their intentions clear as they prepared for the final strike. Thorn could almost hear the cold calculation behind their move, a chess game where human pieces were expendable. "Come on, you bastards," Thorn whispered, fingers hovering over the console. "Take the bait." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, each second stretching into an eternity as they waited for the AI to make their move. The universe held its breath, and for a moment everything seemed to hang in the balance. Then, like a pack of wolves closing on a wounded prey, the AI ship surged forward, intent on delivering the killing blow. Thorn's heart raced, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he prepared to spring the trap. "Now, Jaxa," he shouted, praying they'd timed it right. Jaxa hammered the controls, the main gun humming to life with a satisfying thrum. Outside, the tower's defenses roared in concert, spitting fire and fury into the advancing swarm. The first ship shuddered under the impact, metal shrieking as it was torn apart. The others faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks like ripples in a pond. "Hit them again," Thorn ordered, his voice a whipcrack in the chaos. The tower's main gun released another volley, the shot finding its mark with a precision that spoke of desperation and sheer bloody-mindedness. The alien formation broke, ships scattering as they tried to regroup. "Nice shooting, Jaxa," Snipe called, grinning like a madman. "Thanks, but we're not out of the woods yet," Jaxa replied, wrestling with the console as it spat error codes like a spurned lover. "Keep at it," Thorn said, watching the alien fleet retreat to reassess. "We've bought ourselves a little time." "And what do we do with that time?" Snipe asked, cocking an eyebrow. "We do what humans do best," Thorn replied, setting his jaw. "We improvise." Outside, the AI ships held their distance, regrouping for another assault. Thorn knew they wouldn't make the same mistake twice, their cold logic already recalculating the odds. "Lyra, suggestions?" Thorn asked, turning to his strategist. Lyra tapped her chin, deep in thought. "We need to make them think they've got the upper hand, then hit them where it hurts most." "And where's that?" Snipe asked, half serious. "Their pride," Lyra replied with a smirk. "AI think they are so damn superior. Let's show them how wrong they are." Thorn nodded, already formulating a plan. "All right, folks, let's remind these machines why you don't mess with humans." As the alien fleet loomed in the distance, Thorn felt a strange calm settle over him. It was the calm of a man who'd been one step from death so many times that fear felt like an old friend. "Team, on my mark," Thorn said, eyes locked on the enemy. "Let's make history." And as the universe watched, Thorn and his crew did what humans have always done best. They fought back, with grit, fire, and a middle finger raised to the cosmos. Thorn Vex grimaced as he watched the AI ships regroup in the distance, their shiny hulls reflecting the cold, uncaring void they called their playground. Behind him, the buzz of frantic activity filled the air, a symphony of chaos Thorn had come to know too well. It was like attending a concert where every musician was being electrocuted, and not in a fun way. "Jaxa, what's our status?" Thorn asked, not bothering to mask the urgency in his voice. He swore he could feel the AI digital fingers creeping toward their systems, like a pickpocket with an overactive imagination. Jaxa was elbow-deep in the guts of her console, wires slithering through her nimble fingers like rebellious eels. "Well, Cap, if we're talking about the current state of our defenses, I'd say we're about one sneeze away from a complete systems failure." "That's comforting," Thorn replied dryly, glancing over at Lyra, who was hunched over the holographic display, strategizing like her life depended on it, because it did. "Cap, we've got a problem," Lyra said, her voice remarkably calm for someone trying to outsmart a digital hive mind. "The AI fleet is using some kind of advanced hacking protocol. They're not just trying to take control of our systems, they are rewriting them." "Rewriting our systems. That's one hell of a software update," Snipe remarked, exhaling a plume of smoke that danced in the flickering light. Hope it doesn't come with ads. Thorn rubbed his temples, feeling the headache settle in like an unwanted house guest. Options, people. I need options. Jaxa straightened, her hair a wild mess that gave her the appearance of a mad scientist, a role she was rapidly growing into. We could try a counter-hack. It's risky as hell, but if we can get into their systems, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. Isn't that like trying to outdrink a fish? Snipe quipped, leaning against a console with the nonchalance of someone who'd accepted death as an inevitability. Pretty much, Jaxa agreed, her face a mix of determination and impending doom. But if we don't try, we're sitting ducks. Ducks are supposed to be sitting, Private Dreg muttered, earning him a scowl from Snipe. Thorn considered the proposal, the weight of leadership pressing down on him like a malfunctioning gravity generator. Jaxa, if you think you can do it, then do it, but make sure you've got an escape plan. I don't want you getting fried by a pissed-off algorithm. Jaxa nodded, a wry smile playing on her lips. Don't worry, Cap. I'll make sure I leave a note saying, I told you so, if I blow up. Reassuring, Thorn said, turning back to the situation at hand. He felt the familiar itch of desperation clawing at his throat, a reminder that every decision now was a gamble with stakes higher than a drunk gambler on payday. All right, team, Thorn called out, rallying the ragtag group of survivors. We're going to give Jaxa the time she needs. Dreg, get on the sensors. Snipe, cover her back. Lyra, keep those strategies flowing like bad coffee. On it, Cap, Lyra replied, her fingers dancing over the holographic display with a grace that belied the frenzied situation. As the crew scrambled into action, Thorn allowed himself a moment to breathe. It was the kind of breath you take when you know it might be your last, savoring the air as if it were a rare vintage. The AI fleet loomed like a storm on the horizon, their cold precision a stark contrast to the human chaos they sought to eradicate. Thorn couldn't help but admire their dedication. It was almost endearing in a genocidal way. Jaxa, how's it coming? Thorn asked, his eyes darting between the consoles and the impending doom outside. Almost there, Jaxa replied, her voice tight with concentration. Just need another minute. Well, darling, take your time, Snipe said with a sarcastic drawl. It's not like we're under attack by a fleet of murderous machines or anything. Jaxa shot him a look that could have melted titanium. How about you focus on keeping us alive, and I'll focus on not getting us killed? Snipe grinned, unfazed. Deal. The tension in the room was palpable, each tick of the clock a reminder that they were living on borrowed time. Thorn could practically hear the universe laughing at their predicament, a cosmic joke at their expense. Lyra, Thorn said, turning to his strategist, tell me you have a plan for when Jaxa pulls this off. Working on it, Lyra replied, eyes glued to the holographic map. If we can disrupt their coordination, we might be able to pick them off one by one, but we'll need to be quick about it. Quick and efficient, Thorn echoed, nodding. Two things we're known for, right? Sure, if you replace efficient with reckless and quick with unexpected, Lyra replied with a wry smile. Thorn chuckled despite himself. If they were going down, at least they were doing it with style, or at least what passed for style in a universe intent on grinding them into dust. All right, everyone, Thorn said, raising his voice to cut through the clamor. Time to make these AI bastards regret the day they decided to play God. Positions. As the crew snapped into their roles, Thorn felt a surge of pride. It was the kind of pride that came from knowing you were about to punch the universe in the face, even if it meant breaking your hand in the process. The AI ships hovered just out of range, their intent clear as they prepared to launch another assault. Thorn knew they were waiting for the right moment to strike, like a predator eyeing its prey. Here goes nothing, Jaxa said, her fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of a surgeon. Initiating counter-hack. Now. For a moment the room was silent, a collective breath held in anticipation. Then the consoles flickered, lights dancing in chaotic patterns as Jax's code wormed its way into the AI systems. "Come on, you beautiful bastard," Snipe muttered, eyes glued to the screen. Thorn could feel the tension in the air, a tangible thing that wrapped around them like a vice. Then, with a suddenness that was almost anticlimactic, the screens lit up with a burst of activity. "We're in!" Jaxa exclaimed, her voice a mixture of triumph and disbelief. "I can't believe it, but we're actually in." "Now what?" Dreg asked, his voice tinged with the kind of panic that only comes from realizing you're suddenly in control of a monster. "Now we make them dance," Thorn replied, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Lyra, you ready?" "Born ready," Lyra shot back, her hands a blur over the controls. "Let's show them what happens when you mess with humanity." As the AI ships began to move erratically, their coordination disrupted by Jax's handiwork, Thorn felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. It was a fragile thing, like a flame sputtering in a storm, but it was there. "Hit him hard, hit him fast," Thorn ordered, watching as the first of the AI ships veered off course, colliding with one of its own in a spectacular display of unintended pyrotechnics. "That's one way to make an impression," Snipe said, grinning like a kid who'd just seen his first fireworks. "Keep it up, people," Thorn urged, adrenaline pumping through his veins like liquid fire. "Jaxa, how long can you hold it?" "Not long," Jaxa replied, her eyes glued to the screen. "Their systems are adapting faster than I can counter." "Then we make every second count," Thorn said, determination hardening his voice. The battle unfolded in a chaotic dance of destruction and desperation, the tower's defenses firing with renewed vigor as the AI fleet scrambled to regain their footing. Thorn could feel the tide turning, a shift in the balance that was as exhilarating as it was dangerous. "Lyra, hit them where it hurts," Thorn called, his gaze fixed on the enemy ships. "With pleasure," Lyra replied, her fingers a blur over the holographic display. "Let's give them something to write home about." As the coordinated strike hit its mark, another AI ship went down in a blaze of glory, its sleek hull torn apart by the relentless assault. Thorn couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction at the sight. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "Jaxa, status?" Thorn asked, his focus never wavering. "I'm losing control," Jaxa admitted, her voice strained. "Their systems are adapting too fast. I can't hold them off much longer." "Then we make our last stand count," Thorn said, steeling himself for what was to come. As the last of the AI ships regained their composure, the crew braced for the final onslaught. Thorn knew that this was it, the culmination of their desperate bid for survival. "All or nothing, team," Thorn said, his voice the calm center in the storm of chaos. "Let's show these machines what humanity can do when pushed to the brink." With renewed vigor, the crew launched their final assault, every weapon at their disposal unleashed in a bid to stem the tide. The tower shook with the force of the battle, each explosion a testament to their defiance. As the dust began to settle, Thorn surveyed the aftermath, his heart pounding with exertion and adrenaline. They'd taken a beating, but they'd given as good as they got. For the first time, the odds didn't seem so insurmountable. "Status report," Thorn called, his voice cutting through the haze of smoke and sweat. "The AI ships are retreating," Lyra confirmed, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I think we actually did it." "Not did it, survived it," Snipe corrected, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's a difference." Thorn felt a grin tug at his lips, the kind of grin that came from snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. "Well, team, looks like we've got ourselves a story to tell. And drinks to buy," Snipe added, chuckling. "Assuming there's anything left to drink." "Assuming there's anything left," Thorn echoed, his gaze lingering on the retreating fleet. "But for now, I'll settle for being alive." As the crew gathered, weary but victorious, Thorn felt the weight of their shared ordeal lift, if only for a moment. They'd faced the worst the universe had to offer and come out the other side. If that wasn't something to drink to, he didn't know what was. "All right, folks," Thorn said, his voice a blend of relief and determination. Let's get this place secured. We've still got a long way to go. With a final nod to his crew, Thorn turned his attention back to the task at hand. The battle might be over, but the war was far from won. And if there was one thing Thorn Vex knew, it was that humanity never went down without a fight. Jaxa took a deep breath, her fingers stretched over the console as if she was playing an invisible piano. The rest of the crew watched her with a mix of anticipation and dread, like a group of gamblers waiting for the roulette wheel to stop spinning. "Okay," she said, exhaling slowly. "Time to see just how much chaos we can cause before the AI realizes we're gate-crashing their party." Snipe leaned against a console, lighting up another cigarette. "Here's hoping they aren't the vengeful type," he drawled, blowing smoke rings with casual disdain. "Though if they are, at least we can say we pissed off a race of homicidal robots." "That's something for the bio, right?" "Yeah, right under Enjoy's long walks on the beach and thumbing my nose at doom," Lyra muttered, not looking up from the holo display that swirled with chaotic brilliance. She was mapping out their next move like a chess player contemplating a board that's on fire. Thorn, meanwhile, looked out into the void, eyes tracing the retreating forms of the AI ships. They'd bought themselves some time, but it was like pushing a bear out of your campsite. It'd be back with friends and probably hungrier. "Dreg, what's our status?" Thorn called, trying to keep his voice steady over the din of alarms and the hum of machinery. "Well, Captain, I'd say we're about 2 exhalations away from finding out what being spaced feels like," Dreg replied, his voice jittery. "Power levels are critical and the oxygen's looking like it might join the Dying Resources Club. Membership's exploding." "Brilliant," Thorn muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose as though trying to squeeze out a headache. "Jaxa, any chance you can make us a little less dead?" "Working on it," she said, typing furiously. "But you might want to hold that thought. Looks like someone's trying to crash our system with an RSVP of their own." As if on cue, alarms blared with a new intensity, a discordant symphony of impending doom. The AI fleet, no longer content with spectral bombardments, had decided that a face-to-face meeting was in order. The ship's sensors pinged as boarding pods launched from the enemy vessels, homing in on their location with unnerving precision. "Looks like our guests have decided to bypass the pleasantries," Snipe remarked, flicking ash onto the floor. "Must have gotten tired of playing cat and mouse." "More like cat and slightly battered mouse," Thorn replied. "All right, people, time to get defensive. Dreg, prep what we've got left of the turrets." "Lyra, I assume you've got a plan that involves more than praying." Lyra looked up with a wry smile that suggested she was used to pulling rabbits out of hats, even if the rabbits were more like bloodthirsty wolverines. "Sort of. I've been working on a maneuver that might make us a little less of a sitting duck, more of a moving duck." Thorn raised an eyebrow. "A moving duck, that's encouraging." Lyra shrugged. "Hey, if we're going to die, let's at least die shooting and swearing. It's the human way." There was a grim sort of agreement in the room as the crew sprang into action, readying themselves for yet another round of Who Wants to Die on the worst day ever. Thorn felt the familiar adrenaline-fueled focus settle in, the kind that made you feel alive while simultaneously reminding you just how close you were to not being. "Here they come," Jaxa announced, eyes glued to the screen. Her earlier triumph was tempered by the grim reality of their situation. "And it looks like they're bringing the family." "Family meeting," Snipe said, cocking his weapon with a clack that sounded almost cheerful in its finality. "How quaint." "Hope they brought snacks." The boarding pods hit with a sickening thud, the kind that reverberates in your bones and reminds you that physics is a cruel mistress. The hull shivered, and Thorn could swear he heard the ship groan like an old warhorse being asked to run one more race. "All right, team," Thorn said, drawing his weapon. "Let's show these metal bastards what happens when you gate crash without an invite." The hallways of the orbital tower became a battlefield, every corner a potential ambush, every shadow a possible enemy. The AI had sent in their foot soldiers, or foot circuits, or whatever they used, and they were relentless, advancing with the kind of mechanical precision that made you want to punch them just to prove a point. "Jaxa, any luck?" Thorn shouted over the racket of gunfire and metal clashing against metal. "Still working on it," Jaxa called back, voice strained. She was hunched over a terminal, fingers moving faster than seemed humanly possible. "If I can just— there, got it." The lights flickered and then stabilized, a small victory in a sea of losses. The ship's internal defenses hummed to life, turrets unfolding from the walls like predatory flowers. The AI soldiers paused, recalibrating in that creepy way only robots can manage. "That's more like it," Dreg said, a gleam of hope in his eyes as a turret opened fire, reducing an advancing droid to scrap. "Nothing says get off my lawn like automated laser fire. Keep it up," Thorn yelled, taking aim at a droid attempting to flank them. He fired, the recoil familiar and comforting in its predictability. "Jaxa, can you get us anything else?" "I'm trying to hack into their comms," she replied, a bead of sweat trickling down her temple. "If we can understand what they're saying, maybe we can figure out what the hell they really want." "Other than our charming company, you mean?" Snipe quipped, reloading his weapon with practiced ease. "Any chance they just want to borrow a cup of sugar?" "Gonna bet no," Thorn said, turning back to the fight. The AI soldiers were relentless, pushing forward with the kind of determination that was either admirable or terrifying, depending on how you looked at it. "Got it," Jaxa suddenly shouted, staring at her screen with wide eyes. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." "What?" Thorn asked, still firing off rounds. "What did you find?" Jaxa looked up, disbelief written across her features. They think we're responsible for a plague. They want to make sure we don't spread it further." "Plague? The hell are they talking about?" Lyra demanded, sparing a glance from her display that was currently feeding targeting data to their defense systems. "Looks like somebody's been spreading some nasty rumors about us," Jaxa said, scrolling through the intercepted data. "There's a faction out there using us as scapegoats for whatever's been tearing through their systems. They want to make sure it looks like humanity's the villain." Thorn's heart sank. As if fighting off a homicidal AI fleet wasn't enough, now they had a case of interstellar defamation to deal with. "Great. Just when I thought we couldn't get any more popular. How do we fix this?" Dreg asked, his voice tinged with the frustration of a man who just found out he's been framed for murder. "We need proof," Lyra said, determination hardening her features. "Evidence that this rogue faction's been playing both sides. It's the only way we're getting out of this alive. Proof's going to be hard to come by if we're all dead," Snipe pointed out, taking out another droid with a well-aimed shot. "Let's focus on surviving first." "Right," Thorn agreed. "Jaxa, keep digging. Lyra, get us a strategy for when we find this proof." The battle raged on, each second stretching into an eternity. The AI soldiers were relentless, driven by orders that didn't account for mercy or negotiation. And yet Thorn felt a flicker of hope. If they could just hold out just long enough to expose the truth, maybe they'd find a way to turn this nightmare into a mere bad dream. "Captain, they are regrouping," Dreg warned, his voice tight with tension. "Let them," Thorn replied, a fierce grin splitting his face. "We've got surprises of our own." As the AI soldiers advanced once more, the crew fought with a ferocity born of desperation and defiance. Thorn could feel the tide shifting, the balance slowly tipping in their favor. It was a precarious victory, one that felt more like not losing, but it was enough. For now. The battle was far from over, but they'd bought themselves another chance, another moment to breathe and regroup. And maybe, just maybe, enough time to prove that humanity wasn't the villain of this story, just the misunderstood protagonist trying to make it to the last page in one piece. "All right, team," Thorn said, his voice cutting through the chaos with the authority of a man who refused to stay down. "Let's show these damned machines what it means to bet against humanity." With a shared look of determination, the crew charged forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were battered, bruised, and weary, but they were alive. And as long as that remained true, they would keep fighting. The AI soldiers advanced with the kind of methodical relentlessness that only machines on a mission could muster. Every shot they fired seemed to land a little too close for comfort, and Thorn Vex could feel the odds stacking against them like a bad hand in poker, except the stakes were a lot higher than losing his shirt. "Jaxa, keep those turrets firing." Thorn barked, ducking just in time to avoid a volley of laser fire. The hallways of the orbital tower were fast turning into a scrapyard of shattered metal and dreams, and they were running out of both space and time. "Trying, Captain," Jaxa shouted, her fingers flying over the console. "But these bastards are as persistent as a politician with a grudge." The clangor of battle was deafening, a cacophony of metal on metal that seemed to vibrate through Thorn's very bones. It was the sound of desperation, of a ship and its crew being pushed to their limits. "They're like cockroaches," Corporal Snipe muttered, firing off a shot that took down a droid with a satisfying explosion of sparks. "Except less charming. Keep moving," Thorn ordered, trying to inject his voice with the kind of confidence he didn't quite feel. "We can't let them pin us down." As if responding to some unspoken command, the AI soldiers surged forward, their circuits seemingly fueled by an inexhaustible supply of malice. Thorn watched as one of Dreg's rounds found its target, only for another droid to step into the fallen one's place. It was like trying to bail out the ocean with a thimble. "Captain, they're pushing us back toward the core," Lyra yelled, her eyes darting between the holo display and the encroaching enemy. "We're running out of room, yeah. Well, let's see if we can't make that a little less comfortable for them," Thorn replied through gritted teeth. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, mixing with the grime and tension of battle. "Snipe, Dreg, cover our retreat." "Jaxa, any luck on that comms hack?" "Working on it, Captain," she said, the strain evident in her voice. "But I could use a little less gunfire and a little more quiet if you want miracles." "Sorry, fresh out of quiet," Thorn replied, taking out a droid with a well-aimed shot. "You'll have to settle for chaos." "That's my least favorite flavor," Jaxa said, her voice tight with concentration. They retreated step by painful step, each one feeling like another nail in the coffin they were trying desperately to avoid. The tower's core was their last stand, the place where all their hopes and limited oxygen were concentrated. It was a makeshift bastion, but it was theirs, for now. "Captain, they've breached the outer defenses," Dreg called, his voice tinged with panic. "We're sitting ducks here. We're moving ducks," Lyra corrected, her voice a blend of sarcasm and resolve. "Remember, we've got to keep moving." The AI soldiers were relentless, pressing their advantage with mechanical precision. The crew's retreat had turned into a full-blown rout, and Thorn felt the bitterness of defeat clawing at his insides. "Jaxa, we need that miracle," Thorn shouted, firing off shots as he retreated. The droids were closing in, and every step felt like it might be his last. "There," Jaxa finally exclaimed, her face lighting up with a mix of triumph and terror. "I've hacked their comms. We're in." "Well, don't keep us in suspense," Snipe said, shooting another droid. "What are they saying?" Jaxa's expression darkened as she scanned the data. "They're coordinating an all-out assault. They think we're on our last legs." "Which, let's be honest, we kind of are." "Great. They're better at reading the room than my last date," Snipe quipped, reloading his weapon. "Can you disrupt their coordination?" Thorn asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Not without risking a total systems crash," Jaxa replied, her voice apologetic. "It's like trying to juggle flaming swords while dancing on a tightrope over a pit of sharks." "Sounds like my last performance review," Thorn said, grimacing. "All right, let's keep falling back. If we're going down fighting." The core was a tangled mess of cables and flickering consoles, a testament to the chaos they were trying to manage. It was cramped, uncomfortable, and rapidly becoming a very crowded last stand. "Captain, we're out of time," Lyra warned, her eyes darting between the holo display and the approaching droids. "We need a plan fast." "Plana was not dying," Thorn replied, his voice laced with gallows humor. "Plan B is making sure they regret making us Plan A." Sounds like a solid plan to me, Snipe said, a wry grin on his face as he fired at the advancing horde. At least it's better than Plan C, where we all die horribly. Captain, they're closing in. Dreg shouted, fear creeping into his voice. Everybody hold your ground. Thorn ordered, his voice a rallying cry that cut through the chaos. They would fight, not because they believed they could win, but because they refused to simply roll over and die. The droids flooded the core, a tide of metal and malice that threatened to overwhelm them. Thorn fired until his weapon was dry, then switched to a sidearm with the kind of grim determination that came from knowing this might be his last stand. "Jaxa, any more tricks up your sleeve?" Thorn asked, his voice a desperate plea. "Just one," she replied, her eyes narrowing with determination. "I can overload the core, turn this place into a giant EMP. It'll fry the droids, but it'll also fry us. Not exactly the kind of toast I was hoping for," Snipe said, his voice tinged with morbid humor. "Sounds like a last resort," Thorn said, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. "But if it's us or them, let's make sure it's them." The crew fought with a ferocity born of desperation, each member a stubborn cog in a machine refusing to stop. Thorn could feel the end approaching, a shadow lurking just beyond the edge of his vision. "Captain, it's now or never," Jaxa shouted, her hands poised over the controls. "All right, people," Thorn said, his voice a grim command. "If this is it, let's make it count. Jaxa, do it." Jaxa slammed her hand down on the console, her face a mask of determination tinged with regret. The core hummed with an ominous energy, the air crackling with the promise of annihilation. "I've always wanted to go out with a bang," Snipe said, his voice a sardonic farewell. "See you on the other side," Lyra said, her voice filled with a calm acceptance. The world exploded into light and sound, a cacophony of destruction that resonated through every fiber of Thorn's being. It was the sound of defiance, of a last stand that refused to go quietly into the night. And then, silence. Thorn blinked into the sudden darkness, the silence oppressive and absolute. His ears rang with the ghost of that final, defiant roar, a reminder that they had fought back, even if victory was denied them. "Anyone still kicking?" Thorn asked, his voice barely a whisper in the aftermath. "Still here, Captain," Jaxa replied, her voice shaky but alive. "Alive and kicking," Snipe added, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Barely," Lyra said, her voice a shadow of its usual strength. "But yeah, we're here, Dreg." Thorn called, fear clawing at his insides. A moment of silence, then Dreg's voice weak but present. "Still here, sir." Thorn let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, relief mingling with the bitter taste of survival. They were alive, battered and bruised, but alive. "Guess we're not dead yet," Thorn said, his voice a blend of surprise and humor. "Speak for yourself," Snipe replied, his voice laced with dark laughter. "I think I left a lung back there." "Well, we're not dead," Thorn said, a grim smile on his face. "And that's a start." The world outside was silent, the droids reduced to lifeless husks scattered across the floor. The electromagnetic pulse had worked, buying them a reprieve but at a cost. "We've got to get out of here," Lyra said, her voice filled with the kind of determination that refused to be snuffed out. "Find a way to signal for help." "Easier said than done," Thorn replied, taking stock of their dwindling supplies. "But we've faced worse odds." "I'm not sure about that," Jaxa said, her fingers dancing over the console. "But I'm willing to give it a try." "Let's move," Thorn said, his voice a rallying cry that echoed through the silence. They were alive against all odds, and that was enough for now. The crew picked themselves up, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. They were a ragtag band of survivors, but they were survivors all the same. And as they stepped into the unknown, Thorn couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest hour, humanity refused to be extinguished. In the oppressive silence that followed their impromptu fireworks display, the room smelled like burnt circuitry and desperation. The once loud hum of AI soldiers had fizzled out to dead silence, a silence that felt far too loud. Thorn Vex rubbed a hand over his face, smearing soot and sweat into a grim mask. "Well," he said, his voice echoing in the hollow shell that was once the core, "that was fun. Who's up for an encore?" Snipe, leaning against a mangled console, exhaled a cloud of smoke through a half-sarcastic, half-exhausted grin. "I would, but I left my enthusiasm in my other pants." He flicked the butt of his cigarette onto the smoldering remains of a droid. "Where do we go from here, Cap?" As if she'd been waiting for the cue, Jaxa stepped forward, her hair slightly singed but confidence intact. "I've got an idea," she said, her voice a beacon of hope in a sea of gallows humor. "It's a bit old school, but it might just turn the tables on these tin cans." Thorn raised an eyebrow. "Old school? Like, stab them with a stick old school, or something a bit more high-tech somewhere in between?" Jaxa replied, her fingers tapping a rhythm on the console as she visualized her plan. "We're going to Trojan horse them." Lyra, who had been nursing a bruised shoulder, perked up at that. "You mean like hiding in a giant wooden horse and hoping they invite us in for tea?" "More like sending a virus disguised as a routine systems update," Jaxa clarified. "If I can piggyback it on their comms, we might just take back control of some of the critical systems." "What's the catch?" Snipe asked, shooting a wary glance at the flickering cables hanging overhead. "I mean, apart from the fact that our last plan nearly fried us, the catch," Jaxa admitted, "is that we'll have to do it manually. That means getting up close and personal with the mainframe in the tower's comms hub, which, in case you'd forgotten, is currently crawling with AI soldiers." Thorn sighed, rubbing at the grime on his temple with the back of his hand. "So we need to waltz right back into the lion's den, with the lions being made of metal and very fond of shooting at us." "Pretty much," Jaxa replied with a shrug. "Unless anyone's got a better idea." "Don't look at me," Snipe said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I'm allergic to plans that don't involve immediate running away." Thorn chuckled, though it sounded more like a dry cough. "All right. Lyra, you and Jaxa work on this Operation Trojan virus of yours. Snipe, Dreg, you're with me. We'll need to clear a path to the comms hub." Lyra nodded, her eyes flitting to the holo display, which was now just a cracked, useless shell. "It's going to be tricky without our usual tech support, but I think I can make it work." "Tricky is our middle name," Thorn replied, his voice laced with irony. "Or maybe that was foolhardy. I always mix them up." They moved out, leaving behind the smoldering wreckage of their last stand, hoping it wasn't a permanent one. The corridors were a maze of smoke and shadows, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. "So, how exactly do we take out metal soldiers with basically no ammo?" Dreg asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and trepidation. "Easy," Snipe said, patting the side of his makeshift rifle. "You just have to shoot them in the circuits. Everyone knows circuits are the Achilles heel of any self-respecting murder bot." "Sure, if only they had Achilles heels," Dreg muttered. Thorn led the way, gun raised, mind racing with a million things that could go wrong. At least he didn't have to worry about oxygen anymore. The anxiety was doing a great job of keeping his lungs in overdrive. The path to the comms hub was littered with debris, and the occasional sparking remains of droids who had met their ends with varying degrees of grace. As they turned a corner, a group of AI soldiers stood in their path, mechanical eyes glowing an ominous red. "Back for more, I see," Snipe quipped, raising his weapon. "I'm starting to think they like us." The fight that ensued was a chaotic dance of gunfire and retreat, their ragtag team ducking and weaving through the carnage. Thorn's strategy was less about defeating the droids and more about not dying long enough for Jaxa and Lyra's plan to work. Eventually, they reached the comms hub, a reinforced chamber that looked like it could withstand a siege. Unfortunately, it was also swarming with droids. "Well, this is inviting," Thorn said, ducking behind a console as laser fire erupted around them. "Jaxa, any chance you can make this quick?" Lyra asked over the comm, her voice strained with the effort of not getting shot. "Working on it," Jaxa replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. But this isn't exactly plug-and-play, you know. Just don't take too long, Thorn said, his eyes scanning for a break in the enemy ranks. I'm not sure how long we can keep playing hide and seek with these guys. Lyra, meanwhile, had managed to tap into a secondary console, her face bathed in the pale glow of the screen. You focus on not dying, Captain. We'll handle the nerd stuff. Thanks for the pep talk, Lyra, Thorn replied with a smirk. Real motivational. Jax's hands danced over the keyboard, her eyes glued to the screen, watching the code stream by like a lifeline. I've got the code ready, just say the word, do it. Thorn shouted, firing off a shot that ricocheted off a droid's metallic skull. With a final keystroke, Jaxa sent the virus spiraling into the system, hoping it wouldn't fry her along with the rest of the droids. The power flickered, lights dimming as the AI soldiers froze mid-step, their red eyes winking out. Did it work? Dreg asked, peering cautiously over the console. Only one way to find out, Snipe said, nudging a deactivated droid with his boot. It didn't move. Well, that's a relief. I was dodging lasers like a damn circus act. Thorn couldn't help but feel a spark of admiration for his crew. Somehow, in the chaos and madness, they'd managed to pull off the impossible. Nice work, team. Now let's get the hell out of here before anything else decides to start up. Jaxa grinned, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the now subdued screens. All in a day's work, Captain. As they made their way back, the silence was a strange companion. No clanking of metal footsteps, no whir of mechanical joints. Just the sound of their own breathing and the faint electrical hum of a system slowly returning to life under their control. Well, I guess we showed them, Snipe said, a cocky grin spreading across his face. Humans, 1, killer robots, 0. Let's not get too cocky, Thorn warned, though he couldn't deny the satisfaction of their small victory. We still need to fix the tower's comms and signal for help before they decide to try another wave. Lyra nodded, her mind already racing ahead. We'll need to send a distress signal, get reinforcements. Maybe even a repair crew since half the systems here are ancient. Jaxa nodded, tapping at her wrist console. I'll see if I can jury-rig something. I'd rather not sit around waiting for them to fix things for us. As the crew regrouped in the now-safe core, Thorn allowed himself a moment to breathe. They'd survived another day, another impossible mission. And while they still had a mountain of problems to deal with, at least they were problems they could tackle together. Okay, team, Thorn said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd stared down death and lived to talk about it. We've done the impossible before, and we'll do it again. Let's get this bucket of bolts back in working order and get the hell out of here. Sounds like a plan, Snipe said, slinging his arm around Dreg's shoulders. And maybe once we're out of here, we can find somewhere to crash that doesn't involve homicidal robots or imminent explosion. Dreg nodded, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. I could definitely go for a vacation. Jaxa chuckled, watching them with a hint of pride. You guys ever stop complaining? Not unless you want us to start singing, Snipe replied. Please don't, Lyra said, her voice weary but filled with warmth. I'd rather face another wave of droids. And so, with weary steps and a renewed sense of purpose, they set about the task of bringing their ramshackle tower back online. They were beaten, bruised, and running on fumes, but they were also alive. And as long as they were alive, they had a fighting chance. The comms hub was a mess of tangled wires and blinking lights, like someone had tried to force-feed spaghetti into a vending machine. Thorn surveyed the chaos, rubbing the grime from his eyes. All right, team, let's get this hunk of junk singing again. Jaxa, you think that virus of yours did the trick? She shrugged, her hands busy with a makeshift toolkit that looked like it had seen better days. If it didn't, we might as well start practicing our sorry. We're all out of humanity speeches. Great, Snipe muttered, poking a dead droid with his boot. Just what I love, high-stakes bets with our lives as the chips. Thorn ignored his sarcasm, directing his attention to Lyra, who was fiddling with the holo display. You got eyes on the situation outside. Please tell me it's looking less like an AI rave. Lyra glanced up, her eyes reflecting a tired resilience. Yeah, the fleet's looking more confused than a chicken in a spaceport. Jax's little gift must have hit them where it hurts. Thorne's lips twitched in a semblance of a grin. Let's hope it stays that way until we can figure out who's been pulling the strings. Dreg, any luck on the distress signal? Dreg, hunched over a console, looked like he was trying to decipher ancient runes. Working on it, Cap. This system's so old it might respond better to Morse code. Just bash it with a rock if it doesn't cooperate, Snipe suggested. Pretty sure that's the universal language of technology. Jaxa snorted, but her focus didn't waver from the series of cables she was splicing. Don't tempt me, Snipe. I might take you up on that. Thorne leaned against a console, trying to ignore the dull ache in his shoulders. All right, people, let's stay on target. We've got a fleet of angry tin cans to neutralize and a galactic plague to pin on someone not named us. As if on cue, the main screen flickered to life, displaying a garbled transmission from one of the AI fleet's ships. Thorne's eyes narrowed as the image resolved into the face of a smug reptilian alien, one of the Drath, renowned for their charming habit of playing both sides in any galactic conflict. Captain Thorne Vex, I presume, the Drath sneered, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. I'm Zarthrax, and I believe you've been causing quite a bit of trouble for our little operation. Thorne folded his arms, unimpressed. You must have me confused with someone who gives a damn, Zarthrax. I'm a bit busy unscrewing your mess. Ah, but you see, Captain, it is you who are in the wrong, Zarthrax crooned, its eyes narrowing. The plague, the chaos, it's all you're doing, is it not? Thorne's eyes were slits of steel. And here I thought you Drath prided yourselves on your cunning. Bit of a shame you've bought the wrong narrative. Zarthrax chuckled, a sound like gravel churning in a blender. Oh, we know the truth, Captain. Your virus has exposed our operation, but it has also left your name quite tarnished in the galactic community. Lyra, never one to back down from a challenge, leaned over. Seems to me like you've been using us as a convenient scapegoat, Zarthrax. How very convenient. The Drath's grin was all teeth. Indeed, but now that the truth is out, we might be able to negotiate. A ceasefire, perhaps. Thorne exchanged a glance with Jaxa. You're proposing a ceasefire. From where I'm sitting, looks more like you're proposing not getting blown out of the sky. Zarthrax's eyes glinted. A ceasefire would benefit both parties, Captain. Your reputation could remain intact, and our operations can continue elsewhere, away from prying human eyes. Snipe rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath. Sounds like a deal with a used starship salesman. Thorne considered the offer, his mind working through the layers of deceit. All right, Zarthrax, let's say I agree to this little truce of yours. What guarantees do we have that you'll pack up and take your plague elsewhere? The Drath leaned back, smugness oozing from its every pore. We leave, you fix your reputation. Simple as that. Jaxa snorted, finally looking up from her repairs. Simple, he says. Like AI soldiers and plague wars are ever simple. Thorne sighed, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. Fine. We'll take your deal, Zarthrax. But you'd best believe we'll be watching. Zarthrax's smile was a serpentine twist. Naturally, Captain, until we meet again. The transmission cut off, leaving the crew in silence. A silence that was promptly broken by Snipe. Well, that was almost diplomatic, he quipped. Who knew Thorne had it in him? Thorne shook his head, a weary grin tugging at his lips. Let's just say I'm not lining up to join the Galactic Council anytime soon. Now, let's get this distress signal out and clear our names before Zarthrax changes his mind. Dreg, finally extracting a coherent signal from the console, gave a triumphant whoop. We're live, Cap. Broadcasting now. Lyra watched the status bar inch forward, her face a mask of concentration. Let's hope someone's listening out there. I'd rather not be stuck in this orbital tower of horrors any longer than necessary. Jaxa, her repairs finished, stretched her arms with a groan. And I thought my last job was a nightmare. This one takes the cake and then detonates it. Thorne clapped her on the shoulder. You did good, Jaxa. All of you did. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've got a path. Snipe leaned against a console, a sly grin on his face. Think they'll give us medals for this? Medals? Thorn laughed. I'll settle for a stiff drink and a bed that doesn't threaten to eject me into space. With the signal sent and the AI fleet momentarily stymied, Thorn allowed himself a moment of quiet contemplation. They'd done the impossible, defied the odds, and lived to tell the tale. The galaxy might not have known it yet, but humanity had just proven it wasn't to be trifled with. And as long as they had each other, the ragtag crew of misfits and renegades, they'd face whatever came next with the same irreverent determination that had seen them through this madness. "All right, team," Thorn said, his voice steady and sure. "Let's wrap this up and get ready for whatever's next. We've got a galaxy to save, after all," Snipe snorted. "Guess we're heroes now, huh?" Thorn shrugged, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Heroes? Nah, we're just survivors, but maybe, just maybe, that's enough." And with that they turned back to their tasks, ready to face the uncertain future with the same defiant spirit that had carried them through the storm. They were bruised, battered, and battle-worn, but as long as they were standing they had a fighting chance. And in the end, that was all they needed. The orbital tower creaked ominously as Captain Thorn Vex surveyed the aftermath of their recent negotiations. Zarthrax, the Drathk with a penchant for devious deals, had proposed a ceasefire. In a galaxy where nothing came free, this was the kind of offer that usually came with its own set of handcuffs. "All right, folks," Thorn said, rubbing a hand over his soot-covered face. "We've got a ceasefire, but I'm not betting my last ration bar on it holding. Let's get this tower up and running before our scaly friend decides it's time for a double cross." Jaxa, ever the cynical technician, snorted. "Bet Zarthrax talks about trust like it's some rare alien artifact, all the while sharpening his knives behind his back. Hey, at least he's got the courtesy to stab us in the front," Snipe said, leaning against what remained of a control panel. "Makes a nice change from those sneaky AI bastards." Lyra, eyes fixed on her holo display, gave a curt nod. "We might have bought ourselves some time, but we're still on borrowed credit. Let's not get too comfy. Private Dreg laughed nervously, still jittery from the thought of AI soldiers reactivating. "In this place, I'd rather cuddle a cactus." Jaxa tossed a bundle of wires over her shoulder. "Right. Back to work. Thorn, I'll need you to reroute power from the main grid." "Assuming the wires haven't turned into spaghetti." "Spaghetti might taste better," Thorn replied, but he moved to comply, his movements betraying the weariness beneath his bravado. The comms hub was still a chaotic mess, where the blinking lights seemed to flash in rhythm to some cosmic joke no one else was in on. Thorn's fingers danced over the console, trying to coax some cooperation from the system. "Damn thing's older than Dreg's jokes," he muttered. "Hey now," Dreg protested, "my jokes are classics. This just belongs in a museum or a scrapyard," Lyra added, glancing at the external feeds. "But if we're lucky, this classic tech will get us back on the galactic map." Snipe, ever the skeptic, watched them with arms folded. "If it doesn't, we can always sell it to a museum." "Artifacts of humanity's last stand. Sounds catchy." Thorn shook his head with an amused grunt. "Yeah. And maybe we can charge admission to see the brave crew who didn't die horribly in the process." The crew laughed, a brief moment of levity amidst the task of salvaging what they could from the wrecked station. It was a far cry from a victory parade, but with their lives hanging in limbo, they'd take any scrap of humor they could find. "Signals up," Dreg announced, a rare note of triumph in his voice. "We're broadcasting a big all-help-wanted sign. Let's hope someone cares enough to read it," Jaxa said, half under her breath. "If not, we'll just have to live with being galactic pariahs." Thorn stepped back from the console, wiping sweat from his brow. "We got the signal out, now we wait. Meanwhile, let's see about reinforcing this hunk of metal so it doesn't implode if someone sneezes." "Good plan," Snipe agreed. "This place falls apart faster than Dreg's poker face." "Hey," Dreg protested again, though it lacked the heat of genuine annoyance. JAXA, already elbow-deep in a mass of wires, paused to look up. You know, if this ceasefire holds, might be worth seeing if Zarthrax's lot has any parts we can scavenge. No sense in reinventing the wheel, or the escape pod, Lyra said dryly. Could do with one that doesn't come with a side of accidental ejection. The conversation was interrupted by a faint beep from the console. Lyra's eyes snapped to her display, widening in surprise. Looks like someone's interested in our distress signal. Picking up a ship on the long-range scanners, friend or foe? Thorn asked, his voice calm despite the tension ratcheting up. Too far out to say, Lyra replied, fingers dancing over her controls. Could be someone who wants to help or someone who wants to finish what the AI started. Place your bets, folks, Snipe said with a sardonic grin. We're rolling the dice. Thorn exhaled slowly. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes through that door. Keep the guns hot and the engines warm. JAXA couldn't help but chuckle. You mean the engines that are about as reliable as a Drath's promise? Exactly, Thorn said, clapping her on the back. But it's what we've got. The crew set to work, their banter a constant backdrop to the clatter of tools and the hum of electronics. It was a rhythm they knew well, the soundtrack to their survival. In the silence between jokes and jibes, there was a camaraderie born of shared peril and mutual dependence. Hours passed, the tower slowly coming back to life under their hands. The once chaotic comms hub started to resemble something functional, if not exactly pristine. Suddenly, Lyra's voice cut through the noise. Ships getting closer. Looks like they're trying to establish a comm link. Let's hear what they've got to say, Thorn said, crossing the room to join her. The speakers crackled to life, a static-filled prelude to a voice that was both familiar and unwelcome. This is Commodore Hale of the Galactic Fleet. Captain Thorn Vex, do you copy? Thorn's eyes narrowed. Well, if it isn't the cavalry. Took your sweet time, didn't you? Had to make sure you weren't dead first, Hale replied, his voice carrying a hint of a smile. Or worse, compromised. Fair assessment, Thorn conceded. We've got a temporary truce with the Drath. Any chance you're here to help us turn it into something more permanent? There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that signaled careful consideration. We caught wind of your situation. Seems there's a lot of interest in what you've uncovered. Snipe rolled his eyes. Great. Just what we need, more cooks in the kitchen. Hale continued, unfazed. We're sending a team to assist. In the meantime, any intel you can provide on the AI fleet and the Drath operations would be invaluable. Copy that, Thorn said. Just try not to blow us up on your way in. Wouldn't dream of it, Hale replied, his tone light. We'll be in range shortly. Hale out. The connection cut off and Thorn turned to face his crew. Looks like help's finally on its way. Let's make sure we're ready to meet them. Dreg, looking relieved, let out a long breath. Never thought I'd be glad to see the brass. JAXA shrugged. If they're bringing spare parts, they're welcome to the party. The mood in the room lifted, the promise of aid a tangible balm to their frayed nerves. For the first time since the conflict began, there was hope that they might emerge from this mess with more than just their skins intact. As time ticked by, the distant hum of engines announced the arrival of the fleet's reinforcements. Thorn and his team watched from the tower, a ragtag assembly of ship and station, united by necessity. Well, this ought to be interesting, Snipe muttered, eyes narrowed against the brightened glow of approaching ships. Better than another wave of droids, Lyra said, her tone dry but hopeful. The Galactic Fleet ships maneuvered with precision, their sleek forms dwarfing the battered tower as they settled into orbit. Shuttles detached from their underbellies, making a beeline for the station. Thorn adjusted his uniform, tugging at the collar as if it might somehow make him presentable. All right, folks, let's put on our best faces for our visitors. Try not to look like we've been living in a war zone. Too late for that, JAXA quipped, smudging a streak of grime from her cheek. But hey, maybe they'll like the rustic aesthetic. They gathered at the docking bay, where the first of the shuttles was already disembarking. Commodore Hale stepped out, a tall figure with an authoritative presence and a gaze that swept over them, assessing and curious. Captain Vex he greeted, offering a hand. "Seems you've been busy," Commodore Thorne replied, shaking the offered hand. "Just keeping things interesting." Hale's gaze flicked to the assorted crew behind Thorne. "And this must be the team responsible for the chaos we've been hearing about." Snipe offered a mock salute. "At your service, sir." Chaotic and proud, Hale chuckled, a sound of genuine amusement. "Well, I'm glad to see you've kept your sense of humor intact. It's a rare commodity these days. Comes with the territory," Lyra added, stepping forward. "Though I'd trade it for a working comms system any day. We'll see what we can do about that," Hale promised. "In the meantime, let's discuss the situation. We're interested in hearing your take on the Drath and their little plague operation." Thorne nodded, motioning for the Commodore to follow him. "Right this way. We've got plenty to share." As they moved deeper into the tower, Thorne couldn't help but feel a flicker of optimism. It was a tenuous thing, like a candle flickering in the wind, but it was there. The Galactic Fleet's presence was a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, they weren't alone in this fight. The meeting that followed was a blur of strategy and speculation, plans laid out amidst the remnants of chaos. Hale listened intently, his questions probing and insightful. He was a man who understood the stakes, and for that, Thorne was grateful. By the time they emerged, the sun of the nearby star was setting, casting long shadows across the station. The fleet's ships hung in the sky like silent sentinels, a reassuring presence against the backdrop of an uncertain future. "Well," Dreg said, breaking the silence, "guess we're not the last line of defense anymore." "No," Thorne agreed, his gaze on the horizon, "but we're still in the fight. And that's what counts." Snipe clapped him on the shoulder. "Looks like humanity's still got some tricks up its sleeve." "Yeah," Jaxa said, her voice thoughtful. "Let's just hope the galaxy's ready for them." Thorne smiled, a genuine, weary smile. "One way or another they'll have to be." As the day drew to a close, the crew settled into a newfound rhythm. The threat wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but they had allies now, and that made all the difference. In the battle to come, they wouldn't stand alone. And for a ragtag crew of survivors in a grim universe, that was a victory all its own.